Welcome back to the next section. We're going to talk about perception checking now. This is a process that is described in very brief detail starting on page 123 in the textbook. So if you want to look at it there, you can follow along. But the perception checking process is something that happens after we have already developed our perception. So we've gone through the four stages of developing our perception. Again, the selection, organization, interpretation, and negotiation. And then we have perception checking, again, to really just check to see if our perception is right or wrong. Because frequently, we don't go through this process to figure out if accuracy has been part of the process, and we act based on our initial assumptions. If you look back at the beginning of chapter 4, there are certain things that we know about how we develop perceptions, and one of the things is we cling to our first impressions. This is a step or a process of 3 steps that helps us counter that idea that we cling to first impressions, that we are willing to be more open-minded than that and seek out additional information to know whether or not we have been accurate or if we've prejudged or misjudged a situation. So the elements of perception checking are so simple, and the language is so intuitive. You read those things and you just are like, what? They have to write this down? This is actually something in a textbook. It's just like a no duh sort of idea. But it has to be there because we almost never do this. If we actually engaged in perception checking more often, or it became a regular habit, we would eliminate so much conflict in our lives and be able to navigate through situations with so much more ease and less strife and have much more effective communication. But it's something that we don't regularly do. So by drawing attention to it, hopefully it's something that we are going to start paying attention to more often. And I'm going to have some activities and exercises for you to engage in so you can use the elements of perception checking to actually recognize what happens when we have our initial perceptions and need to verify whether or not we're accurate and how it is we can go about succeeding in that process. So just as a quick review, again, this is from page 123. The elements of perception checking start with a description of the behavior you noticed. So again, this is just describing what it is that you've seen or encountered. It requires you to look at facts. It's not talking about how you feel about situations. It's not jumping to your conclusion. It's what was that first notice? Basically, what was happening in your selection process? What did you hear or see that you developed your perception about? And then the second thing is asking you to reconsider the organization and interpretation stages by providing at least 2 possible interpretations for the behavior. You probably had one initially. What else could be happening? Think of all the times that we are observers in the world and we just jump to conclusions or assumptions about things. This happens for me in traffic a lot. I have lots of perceptions about other drivers and their motivations and their ability or lack thereof. But sometimes people just have multiple reasons, but we're usually not super gracious in situations where we don't like what has happened. So are there times when you could actually come up with 2 possible explanations or interpretations of what you saw? Somebody, ran a red light. I jumped to the conclusion, oh, they're just bad drivers, they're really impatient, they don't care about anybody else. It's not likely, but it's possible that there's a medical emergency, or they have to respond to a scene, or there's something very, very serious going on that would rationally justify that action, even in my opinion, when I'm not all that gracious about drivers who don't respect the rules of the road. So that's how easy it can be in theory. In practice is the real challenge. And then the last step that we can engage in is a request for clarification about how to interpret the behavior that we've witnessed. So where do you go for additional information? Sometimes we don't have the opportunity to actually ask the person who has acted in a way that we have developed a perception around. We have to resort to other people get secondhand information. Sometimes we can review things, but not always. But when we are in interpersonal situations, this is when it can be a really rich, rewarding experience. We frequently can ask for clarification. Oh, when you said this or when you did this, what is it that motivated you? Or could you tell me a little bit more about your reasoning or explain why it is that you did what you did? It's not always an easy conversation. It's not always comfortable because we're not used to doing this. But again, when there's conflict, when there's uncertainty, the perception checking process is one of the most simple and effective things that we can actually incorporate into our lives and actually get better at communicating and have more effective results. I hope you start using it. I'm going to give you opportunities to use it, but it's one of the big takeaway ideas, even though it seems like common sense. If we engage in it, our lives truly will be better.